We were pleased to have leading us in this 4-week series, Ernest and Camryn Smith, who are asset-based community development experts and coaches for churches. And we invited them to come coach us so that we can get to look at our neighborhood. We already are doing some things in our neighborhood in our church, and I know some other churches have been invited, and we're interested in getting to know our neighbors better and learning how to walk with them so we can help them maintain their integrity and learn how to help themselves while we're walking with them. So if you have any more to do, I'll let them introduce how they do this. And Mr. Ernest.
Thank you. So welcome and thank you for coming tonight. And what I'm going to do is borrow Camryn's. So this isn't flashing in my eyes while I stand up here. I think it'll be fine. Voila. So I'm glad you guys could come tonight, and just to give you a little bit about who we are and how we got into this. I'm from Ohio, but moved to North Carolina when I was 10 and grew up in North Carolina. And part of my story is when my parents got divorced, when my dad left our family, my mom struggled, which is why we ended up moving to North Carolina. And in that struggle, we had family support systems around us that helped us, but yet and still there was a struggle. So there were times when we were, at that time, getting government cheese. She was working, but it was just a struggle for us to make it as a family. We went through that whole process. And so all of my life, since I've been an adult, one of the things that has been a passion of mine is being able to work back in communities such as what I came out of in order to serve those folks and do so with dignity. And as I met this beautiful woman here who consented to be my wife, and one of the things that all of us men do is we reach for the stars and we try to get someone, and I was fortunate enough to snag a beautiful woman, an intelligent woman, someone who came from a background that was very different from mine. Her background, she grew up in a family that, pretty much stayed middle class, I would say. When I went to her home, the swimming pool was in the backyard. This was a little foreign to me, but that was cool. And so as we continued in our married life, I was fortunate enough to go to college and be able to use some of my giftings to make a living for our family. I worked in the financial field, and we were doing well, but always in the back of my mind was this struggle with, why are some people left behind? Why are some people, not thriving in our communities and in our, I'll say our communities. So that was always in my heart and mind. And I started attending a church. I want to say not unlike this church, but it was unlike this church. But not unlike this church in that, it was a predominantly white church, although my history had been growing up in an African-American church, in part. And so, and I enjoyed the things that I was getting out of the church. However, there was still this tug that said, although the teaching is good, there's something missing. You're still missing this piece of reaching back into community that for me was very vital. And so I talked to, they liked me. I became an elder in the church, and I kept on talking to the leadership and saying, why aren't you serving or reaching into communities like mine? And they had their answers, which weren't satisfying to me. And as I stayed in the church and loved the church, and but there was, honestly, to be confessional here, let me confess to you. There was this struggle, this sense of even though I loved the church and was a part of it, there was a sense that you don't understand, and it was easy to make it a black-white issue because we were the minorities in the church. We were indeed minorities. There was only a few of us, but I think it was deeper than that. And so I was sort of holding an ought against the church, and the church was involved in missions overseas. And and they would go to Romania. And I remember speaking to the elders of the church and the leaders of the church and saying, I'm glad that you go to Romania to serve these people that look very much like you. Since it really reflects, in my opinion, what you do in our own communities. You serve people that look like you, and and you don't go into communities that don't look like you. And so, but God in His infinite wisdom, sort of convicted me and said, if you're going to be a part of the church, you need to support the mission of the church. And so, long story short, we ended up going to Romania, and on a short-term trip. And in our short-term trip, we encountered gypsies. Roma is what they are technically called. And so with our encounter with the Roma, there was an affinity that we had, because we went to this conference and there were Roma there, there were Romanians there were Hungarians there, maybe even a German or two. And so they were all there at this conference. And the Roma really sort of, they're darker skinned people than everybody else there, and so they attached themselves to us, and we enjoyed the fellowship. And when we came back, we really began to feel, I'm skipping a whole lot of steps, the call to go to missions in Romania. Part of the history of the Roma is that they were also an enslaved people. And their enslavement ended right around the same time that slavery ended in the U.S. And so, but they're still very much oppressed, very much living in an environment where there are third world conditions happening, and folks really don't understand, in part, why isn't this group able to come up? And so when we went to serve in missions there, one of the things, we went with we didn't go completely with the traditional missionary mindset, but we had vestiges of that within us. We're going to help these people. But we were leaning towards developmental, which is to say, in developmental strategies, it isn't just about helping these people, but it's about walking with them to bring sustained change. And so, as we were there serving, one of the things that began to really get on our nerves was how we saw a lot of mission sending agencies and other groups and churches, how they would come in with this mindset of, doesn't it make you feel good to give to the poor? Doesn't this, and you're really helping people. You're seeing them, not transform, let me back up. You're seeing, steps made, or so you think. But poverty continues. People's lives, some individuals are taken out of poverty, and we can feel good about that. But the systems are still there, and the church continues to perpetuate the system. And so it was those things that built in me a desire to see something more developmental. And we encountered some teaching when we got back that really helped transform. We were leaning in the right direction, but when we came here, we began to see ways and methods of really being transformational in the work that can be done in communities. And so right now, that's our mission in life. Our mission in life is to help others begin to see communities from a perspective that values the people in the community, that doesn't look at just how I can feel good and how I can begin to, do good, but look at a more complete picture. So that's what we're here to talk to you about. And how we're going to do it, and it isn't just tonight. It is tonight, it's next week, it's the following week, and it's the week after that. And some of the things that you'll hear, some of them are building. And so as we talk tonight, and folks may be encouraged to come next week, which is great, but some of the things, and we'll recap where it's necessary. But there is a building here, so I encourage you to come and not just say, well, I'm interested in this topic, so I'll come for this one, and I'm not interested in the other, because we really feel like it's a building thing. So, when we think about church, the primary thing, there are three things that often folks think about when they think about, what does the church, what are the typical roles of church in community? A lot of times we think evangelization, because we read the scripture, go ye into all the world. And so we're supposed to go into our communities and spread the good news. That's true. we often think that it is to build our churches. You know, if only the folks in the communities by us will just become part of our church, we can grow and we can impact the world. There was a philosophy of a megachurch pastor. Now I can say this because at one time I was on staff at a megachurch, so you know I can talk about it because that's part of my experience. But one of the things that I heard a megachurch pastor say about churches and growing is that if it's healthy, it will grow. And I was like, you know, that sounds logical, you know, healthy things grow, but that's not the complete story. And I was in a meeting last night, and Cleve May said this about one of his a book that he read that helped change his life was by a pastor from Latin America who was a part of a church that all of a sudden began to grow, and it just grew and grew, and then people started getting him on the speaking circuit, and you know he had to write books, and you know obviously if it's growing, we want to know what it's doing, because in today's culture, you know, there are a lot of churches that are dying, truthfully. And the church is at a crossroads in some ways. We look at some of the churches that I grew up in, some of the more traditional churches, you know, they're older people, and then after a time, the church sort of disappears. And so, you know, in some ways, you look at that original statement, if it's healthy, it's going to grow. But in other ways, you know, there are some times when things that are healthy and don't necessarily grow. And so, but anyway, Jose, I'm sorry, I said Jose. It is not. It's Juan Carlos Ortiz. He said this: sometimes we fool ourselves because we grow numerically. We think that it is growth. And by the way, you know, as his church was growing, he got to a place where he was doing so much, and you know, that he burnt out. And so he went on a sabbatical and began to seek God. And this is part of what he got when he sought God. Sometimes we fool ourselves because we grow numerically. We think that this is growth, but to grow in numbers is not spiritual growth. Cemeteries also grow numerically. To have 100 people without love, 200 people without love, it is just to get fat. So, you know, no, we're among friends here, so I'm gonna say what I really think about mega churches. You know, I really, you know, again, I've been in one, but I think that they become so focused on growing the numbers that they never look at what it is that their impact in the community. They try to have impact, but it's never really, from my perspective, a healthy thing. Or maybe, let me not be so black and white. Maybe sometimes it can be, but you know, I don't think it is. And so that was the second way that, so we're talking about evangelization. We talked about, you wanted to talk about making disciples? Yeah. I'm sorry. My lovely wife. Hi. Supposed to applaud. Let me
So, the reason why we talk about this, because we are in the South. We can't lie to ourselves. If we were in New England, if we were in the Midwest, sometimes if we were out West, we would not have to have this conversation. But Durham is an anomaly as a city in the South. But even in our anomaly of us being more forward-thinking, more progressive, we still have these vestiges of Southern religiosity that Ernest and I a lot of times have to kind of unravel a bit when we're helping churches and organizations walk with communities in a healthy, intentional way. And that's part of the reason why, in part, to build up communities like you guys, because for you know, you guys are not a mega church, but you're vibrant, you're live, you're full of life, and you have a real strong calling to reach out in this community. And we want to build up communities of any size in the faith community and let you know that you have everything within this body right here to impact Durham in a major way. You don't need to have 5,000 members. You have everything that you need right in the four walls of Pilgrim. You have all the intellect, all the bodies, all the hands, all the hearts. Jesus is here, you know, God is here with you, just like he is anywhere else. So we want everyone in this community to be equipped in the same way.
We also have some folks here from Judea Reformed and some other congregations.
Okay. I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. I just wanted you to know.
Yeah, thank you for that. So, and we do not only include Christian communities as well. Anyone, of any faith community, our Muslim brothers and sisters, our Jewish brothers and sisters, our Baha'i brothers and sisters, anyone of any faith tradition has a lot to give. And so let me be highly inclusive in that.
I need to introduce you interrupt you for 1 second. Our cleaning person is here tonight, and I'm closing the door so she can in fact do her job, because she's a person who has 3 different jobs, and I don't want her to have to come back tomorrow, of course, okay? So if you hear noise, just skip through it.
We'll speak louder.
So any community, for that matter of fact, and even any secular community, any community group has the power within it to make a huge change in the system of oppression, in any community, all across the nation and across the world. So generally when we talk about quote unquote discipleship, or people kind of raising up, we want to get away from the paradigm of people making disciples in the terminology or the phraseology that we've heard from a Southern Christian context. Our methodology for making disciples is not necessarily evangelization. It's basically loving each other, creating everyone as if they're created for the sole purpose of living, loving, and being, and that their lives have matter and that they have meaning just by virtue of being human. It doesn't matter where you come from. It doesn't matter what color you are. It doesn't matter your sexual orientation. It doesn't matter your education. It doesn't matter anything other than the fact that you're simply a human being. And how we interact with each other in our day-to-day interaction speaks volumes as to how we view life, we view ourselves, and we view our community. And so I think, especially in this climate now, as we have so many hot-button political things going on right now, I think in a sense we've lost that in our nation. We've lost the sense of identity, that how we treat those who have no voice a lot of times, or whose voices have been ignored, basically, ultimately says a lot about who we are as a nation. I think we've had a lot of lies that we believe in American exceptionalism. I think that we think we're a lot more generous and loving than we actually are. In Durham, we have 27% childhood poverty rate in the city of Durham. This community has a lot of wealth. It has a lot of assets. We should not have one child, not one, going to bed hungry. We should never have that. We really shouldn't have any adults who want to work without the opportunity to work. There really is an excuse, but why is that? And so our viewpoint on making disciples is for people to reach out into their community and use the assets and the gifts and the networks that they have to help bridge that gap for people who've been left out systemically, people who don't know how to get into a GED program, people who don't know how to matriculate into the Durham Tech, the community college educational system, or even transfer over into a 4-year university or college, or enter into a trade school. There's all sorts of connections and things that we take for granted as people of middle class status or material status. We just take it for granted and automatically think, oh, well, they know how to do that. Well, no, not everyone does. And so that's part of what a huge asset that we think we as middle class people have to give to people who have kind of been left out of the system. And that, to us, is discipleship. That's how we're supposed to treat each other, supposed to love each other, make those connections, and to treat each other with dignity and respect, and use language and demeanor and relationally communicate to each other based on those things.
So we're rolling through the typical roles of the church. The first was evangelization, which we talked about spreading the message, building churches, and making disciples are common thoughts. The second of the typical roles of a church is service, which is aiming to help other folks. When I'm talking about typical roles of the church, I'm talking about roles of the church in expression to their community, the roles of the church or the faith community. So, and then the third role is community organizing. We're going to talk a little bit more about the next two, which is service, and then community organizing, and we're going to spend the bulk of our time with one of those. We'll let you guess which one.
So when we talk about service, traditionally, generally speaking as humans, we always default to look at the negatives. Some of us are much more positive. Some see the glass half full, while most of us just by virtue of default of how we're raised, to have a lens in this world to look and see the glass is half empty. And so when generally organizations in particular, I'm going to pick out, because I'm sorry, I'm talking about the Christian church. This is what we have done that is so damaging. I'm talking about the Protestant Christian church. Let me be very succinct. We have been so needs-based in our outreach that we do so much damage. There was an example of a well-meaning Christian faith community went into
mega church.
It was a mega. Well, Ernest is on this thing that just drives him crazy right now because we see the damage and we're like, would you please stop? They can't stop. But they were very well-meaning, and they went out and they had one of their days of service, which we all have heard. I mean, quite a few of us have heard about churches having one day of service to undo 150 years of oppression. But, you know, and so, no, they haven't quite gotten.
Can somebody do the math? 365 days. Somebody do the math. 365 days a year. If you're going to undo 150 days, 150 years of oppression, and you do one a year, how many centuries are we talking about before you really actually?
Or even a week. I mean, we've heard of the week of service too, and I was like, so one of these organizations, one of these churches, outfitted their whole team. They went all to, picture this, coming into my neighborhood in East Durham, and a mega church with probably 300 volunteers all flooding into my neighborhood. And on their shirt, they have the name of their church on the front, and then on the back they have, "To the least of these."
Oh.
Wow.
How damaging is that?
Maybe they were talking about themselves.
Half full, Laura, half full.
So this is very common, not only in terms of what the signage that these organizations have, but in terms of how they come in and talk. Their heart, it comes through. People in poverty are not stupid. They just don't have the material means that middle class people do. So they come in with all of these, they speak to people as if they don't understand. They're very condescending. It's all about them. They have caveats to everything, not all the time, but a lot of times they have caveats to how you can access what they have there to bring. If you don't live the lifestyle that they agree with, that's another caveat, because they want you to formulate your whole identity as a man or a woman or someone who has a different sexual orientation in their identity. They want you to formulate everything around what they believe in their belief system. And so we do not think that that is the best way for community development. We cannot go in and paternalize people. We cannot go in and colonize people. We have to walk with people. We are free-thinking adults. And all of us have free will. No matter what faith tradition you come from, we all have the free will of choice. And people choose what lives they live. And so part of our training is, that's when we go into different churches other than yourself, and we kind of try to undo some of this thinking of putting caveats upon how I'm going to help you if you do X, Y, and Z, because that's not sustainable. It doesn't last. It is highly oppressive, and it's basically colonizing yet again. And so
we could tell you story after story of these sort of service-oriented focus that churches have. And today, this afternoon, is a great example. And I got two stories and then I'm gonna stop. So this afternoon, I'd sent out an email earlier today inviting folks to a presentation that's going to be at Duke's East Campus by a friend of ours who did, she runs Hidden Voices, Lyndon Harris, and she did a wonderful, how do you call it? It's an artistic expression of her studies, which is looking at the school-to-prison pipeline. And I was inviting folks to come to that. And someone responded to the listserv that, and I'm not going to take which listserv I put it on, and said, oh, we should go because if we go, because my church is doing an Adopt a Felon program. I was like, Adopt a Felon? You know, just, all these alarm bells started ding, 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 First of all, not every person who comes out of prison is a felon. Not everyone who goes in prison is a felon. Not everyone who is convicted of even a felony actually did that crime. Just because you're convicted doesn't mean that, that was, lots of things could happen to cause that to happen, and so we just need to look at our language when we're trying to do something and not just, adopt the highway, adopt the child, adopt the felon. That just really hit me in the wrong way. And there's another organization that, has this mentality that, I'll do something for you, service-oriented, but you must fit this paradigm. And they say, in order for me to feed you, I need you to bring me a program. First it was, bring me a program that you attended church on Sunday morning, signed by the pastor. And then it was, bring me a program from this list of churches, because, from their perspective,
The other ones weren't holy enough.
from their perspective, it isn't just any church, it's got to be the ones that agree with what I say, and so they go into communities wanting to do good, but end up, from their service perspective, doing a whole lot of harm. So John McKnight, who is one of the founders of this whole thing called asset-based community development, says this in The Careless Society. Service systems can disable communities in 3 ways. First, they can divert resources from lower income people to those who are professional helpers. A friend of mine who does this training, which I highly recommend, called Racial Equity Institute. Anyone been to that in the room, heard of it? I can tell you more about it later. They talk about how some of the agencies that go into communities, it's all about them. They're in, how does Suzanne put it? They're in the business of helping people, but they get their dollars, they fund their institutions, they do all of this. And the work that ends up happening, they do some good. I'm not going to argue about that, but it's really not about the community. It's about them building up their organization. That's something we have to be careful of. So the second way that John McKnight says is they teach people to focus first on their needs and deficiencies rather than their resources and potentials. I typed this up and somehow I put a word in there that I don't understand what that word was. But rather than their resources and potentialities. So it's like, for instance, going into the Roma villages, folks should focus on, all the challenges and problems rather than being with the people and focusing on the things that are good, the things that are wonderful. And God blessed us when we were in Romania that, and I think part of it is because we come from a group that's been oppressed, so we recognize things. And just being with people, it endeared them to us in a way. And we didn't make a difference. When I go into their homes, now I'll tell you, I don't eat pork, and some folks in here know that. But you go into their homes, and dietarily, I told them I couldn't eat pork. But anything else they put in front of me, I would eat it and drink it. Sometimes I got sick, but it's that honoring and being with people that makes a difference. And and as I'm with them, one of the things that I begin the first thing, you begin to recognize the great qualities that they have. But if you're only seeing needs and problems, it shapes everything you do, rather than seeing people. And that's the thing that we really want you guys to get as we move forward. So the third way is they tend to displace community-based citizen organizations and disregard their power to solve local problems. In other words, we have the solution, we'll come in here and fix your problems. Even though you got an organization over here that may be doing some work, they're not doing it well enough. They're not doing it right. So, instead of coming behind them, we'll just come over here and create our own. And so what does that say to the community? And we have to think of those. So again, the 3 typical roles of the church evangelization service, and the third one is community organizing. And so we're going to spend some time with that, and we're going to go into, voila.
Okay, this is a Chinese proverb. I know that many of you who have, some of you who've been to our training before have seen it. This is kind of something that Ernest and I try to live by in our lives. We fail, but we try to live by this. Go to the people, live among them, love them, start with what they know. Build on what they have, but the best leaders, when their task is done, the people will remark, we have done it ourselves. And so that's the essence of what we believe fosters good, sustainable relationships, is more of an asset-based approach. Neighborhood Allies, which is our organization, sees the communities that are often viewed as troubled and problematic as places that have beauty and have gifted individuals often waiting to be seen, heard, and treated with dignity. We seek to help organizations, institutions, and churches walk with those individuals in a life-affirming way.
What did you want to go back to?
No. There we go. So basically, some of the basics of community development that we aspire to so far, because we are a Christian-based organization or a faith-based organization. We already acknowledge that God is already there. A lot of times when people use language, especially in the South and especially in traditional church environments, people speak about neighborhoods as if they are just desolate with nothing redeeming, that nothing is there that's positive. And we want to remind everybody that God is there, that God created the people within those communities, and that He loves them, and He's been there since the very beginning of time. So sometimes that's something that we all have to be reminded of. It does get difficult in some of these neighborhoods, so you have to remind yourself sometimes. We do not do for others what they can do for themselves. We do not, we try to encourage people to basically see the giftings and callings that they have within themselves, to kind of walk the path. We walk along with them, but when we see that there's something that is kind of sort of very difficult, we walk alongside of them, and we actually kind of pepper little assets in between there where they have themselves aren't able to kind of cross over that mountain. But we do not do for people what they can do for themselves. We start with what you have. In our community, how we began this almost 2 years ago was when we had the shooting. We had a shooting on Driver Street. 2 kids in our community were grazed by the bullet, and a gentleman walking along the street on a Sunday evening. And so the community decided that the reason why we allowed this to happen in our community was because we didn't know each other. No one knew each other, no one talked to each other. We were too afraid as a group of people to kind of confront some of the gang activity that was going on. So someone suggested that we break bread together, something as simple as that. We didn't go out and formulate all these community watches. We didn't have anything highly systemic that would require a whole lot of human capacity at that point in time, because we were so young. So we started with what we had. We started with a group of people. We all loved to talk, we all loved to eat, and we all could cook, and we all brought our food. And so we do that. And our potlucks, we've been going on for almost 2 years at this point. So we tell people, if you don't have anything, bring it. If you have a loaf of bread, bring that. If you have a pack of crackers, bring that. If you have a whole 2 and 3 chickens, bring that. And we have never, ever run out of food. We have never. We have people that some don't have anything to give, and there's a lot of times we know the families that we have to pack up the rest of the food for them to take home to help them last, through the end of the week. And so, but there's always, for those in the community who have more to give, they are more than happy to do that. And for those who don't have as much, they are happy to come, and we try to treat everybody with dignity and respect, and that everybody is equal at the table. Start with relocation, redistribution, and reconciliation. These are the 3 tenets of Christian-based community development. I don't know if any of you know Dr. John Perkins, who's over Christian community development. He was a civil rights leader in Mississippi, who was subjugated to a lot of, during Jim Crow, just really went through a lot of just being profiled and being beaten and harassed by the police. Saw the great depth of need in the community, so far as a lot of poverty, a lot of kids that are being uneducated. Jim Crow was still full force in effect, and basically started with relocation, asking people of privilege to move into the areas where there were people who basically were being oppressed, generally because people of privilege have a voice that powers that be will listen to. Redistribution, not so much redistribution of wealth in terms of money, even though some of that goes on, but more along the lines of redistribution of connections and networks and community resources of who you know. If you think about now the job market, I know quite a few of my friends, including myself and Ernest, how you get jobs or contracts is who you know. And so if you're a person that lives in communities of poverty, you don't have those connections readily available to you. So that's a form of redistribution, just helping people to make those connections so that they can gain a sustainable income for themselves. And reconciliation is being reconciled to each other, to our community, to our land, and just trying to build a more peaceful, equitable environment within our communities. And realizing we can do more do more together than alone. Part of it is also that we have a saying that there is no one in our community that we do not need. And that is a very difficult thing to live by, especially for some people who, like myself, who, when people keep on committing crimes and they tend to be very violent, it's very difficult to try to say, we need you. It's easy to get rid of people. It is really easy to get rid of people. But we have to ask ourselves why. And when you see some of the history of some of the people that live in my community, it is a wonder why they haven't imploded. And that's the only thing that they're doing. It is the resilience in my community is astounding. And so we try to live by that. Again, we fail. It's difficult.
There's a quote from that I love, Bryan Stevenson. He says, "You're not the worst thing you've ever done." And it's, when you think about it, how many, what is the things that we've done that we're ashamed of? What are the things that we've done that honestly, in different settings, would be really, really frowned upon? But that doesn't define who we are. And so what I try to live by, and as Camryn says, we're fallen too, and sometimes we don't do it well. But what I try to live by is not to judge people based on, what I may consider the worst thing that they've ever done, because that's not who they are in total. We need to begin to look at people with an eye that, one, they can change, and two, that they were created in the image of God, and there are some things about them that are good, and things about them that are gifted, things about them that can be of value to our community. So we just need to have that mindset that, that everyone has value. And it's a messy thing. But I think when we begin to have that vision for others, those who may have been through some things, we can begin to sow into their lives something different. Not just what the expectation of, others are, that may just see them as completely negative, but see them as something of value.
So the three approaches for community development basically are gentrify them, displace the poor, and replace them with middle and upper class. We're seeing that now in a lot of our communities, especially in Northeast Central Durham. We're having basically what they're calling the suburbanization of the poor. And so we're having more and more of our economically distressed communities being displaced. I know I live in probably, I can safely say, the roughest neighborhood in the Triangle, and we have, this past summer, we had three or four houses that all had bidding wars, two of which sold $30,000 to $35,000 over asking price. And so we've had families in our community group being displaced. They have to move way out on Ellis Road. And so they're disconnected from the school, they're disconnected from babysitters, people that can help them with their children for little to no money. They're disconnected from supportive family, they're disconnected from social services, which is right on right at the beginning of downtown out of my neighborhood. The health department, the same thing. They're disconnected from the bus line. It gets fewer and fewer. You have to wait longer. It's a financial drain having to drive back and forth like that when you're disconnected in that way. Number 2 is pour resources into them, do needs assessments, and then start programming to overcome the needs. We already talked about that. Or asset-based community development, discover who is there, what gifts they have, what they're passionate about, and help them to do what they care about the most. I just want to do this. So quickly, just involvement in a community. Involvement in means it's kind of like an organization that's a fortress organization. A lot of churches or organizations in my community are kind of fortressed in that they do not have an open setting. They don't have their building open to allow community groups to come in and use them whenever they would like to without a lot of red tape. If it's a church, they're kind of closed except for their parishioners when they come in on Sunday mornings, and a lot of the parishioners are commuters. And so that's a church that has involvement in a community. 2 or 4 community is a church, which we talked about the people that have the week of service. They come in on their time frame, they come in with all their caveats, and they're doing work to them and they're the ones that call the shots. It's not very developmental, it's generally needs-based, and it's usually more for the church itself to build capacity and kind of excitement within that congregation or that faith-based community that it is for the community, because generally there's no relationships. And then the last type of organization is an involvement with the community, which is what you guys are doing here. You're wanting to walk with your neighbors. You're wanting to build relationships. You're wanting to go deeper. And it's even that small little act of somebody having coffee one day or just sitting and listening or reading a book and just getting to know people. That's more along the lines of sustainable development. It is costly, and that resources are one thing, but relationships are a whole nother thing, and it can get messy. We're all messy, and we're all very intricate beings. And so when you start getting into the lives of people in poverty, who live in material poverty, you start to feel what they feel, because you start to love the people. You start to see what they have to go through, all the hurdles they have to go through, how they have to take out a whole entire day just to go for a doctor's appointment, or how if they don't dot this I and check this box, then their benefits are gone. And how it just causes all this anxiety, and how the system is working against them. And so that's what we're called to do, as I think, in an equitable society, as middle-class people or people of privilege, is to walk alongside and advocate with our neighbors who have been left out.
So there are 3 more things that we want to get through tonight. The first is going to be an audio from one of our favorite radio programs, This American Life. Anybody listen to This American Life? I love that. You hear so many different concepts and ideas. But we're going to listen to this segment on This American Life where they're in Haiti. This is, I don't know how long after the earthquake, but they're responding, someone's going back to Haiti. It's a great story that demonstrates some of the things that we want to talk about and the messiness and the challenges of what we're dealing with here. The second thing we're going to do is an exercise. And that's going to be where you guys can begin to envision within yourselves. Camryn is going to lead us in this great exercise that looks at our own gifting within this room. This is something that we do in communities to help them begin to realize that it isn't just those negative things that folks talk about. You have so much to give. God has created you and given you some giftings, and that's part of what we want to impart into folks is that they are gifted. And the last thing we're going to do is just we're going to cover a few more facts, and then we're going to leave some time for questions. And we will be out of here no later than 12 o'clock tonight, I promise you. Did you find it?
I'm sorry, I don't know how to minimize this. I'm sorry, I'm a little computer Sorry, okay. There it is, sorry.
We all have different gifts.
That's the, yeah.
So I was at a meeting on Friday of last week, and we were talking about building up the new catchphrase is Indigenous Leadership. So, folks of the community and, allowing them to lead in the efforts. And it was telling, this was a CCDA meeting. And because at the national conference, one of the facts that they pointed out was that 70% of the organizations that call themselves CCDA organizations are Christian Community Development Association, are led by, that are going into communities such as the ones that Camryn and I live and work in, are being led by predominantly, people like us, are being led by predominantly white and predominantly male leadership. It's efficient sometimes, and there's this struggle to recognize that to equip people with what they need, it takes more time, it's messy, and it's cumbersome. Whereas we are in America more used to, as she said, the fix-it culture. And so the thing that we're challenging folks to do is to, one, build relationships with folks in a way that is genuine, a way that is messy and costly of your time. It's the vacuum cleaner that we were warned about earlier. It's all right. I don't know about how it's going to record, but it is what it is. And so it's messy. But I believe that the result is so much better. I was so excited when we went to New Orleans, a national conference, that we took some of the folks from our community to this conference, and just the stories of how they were equipped and came back and shared and excitement. And so Camryn and I are committed to, in the work that we do, is bringing folks alongside of us and actually pushing them out ahead. And that first quote, go to the people, live among them, love them, and after the work is done, they will have said, we did it ourselves. That's what we're striving for. And this is another story that y'all can't tell my pastor that I told y'all this. If you know who my pastor is. Don't tell my pastor I said this. So last night we were in a meeting, and he was planning, and I do appreciate his heart. He's a white male. And I appreciate his heart of saying, because our church it's a church plant, it's new, it's beginning to grow. All of a sudden this fall, we're having a space constraint where we can't fit enough people. We don't have enough chairs to fit everyone. And his perspective is, before we look at growth, I want to make sure that it isn't just about the people coming in, it's about us sowing into their lives in a meaningful way. And so I want to challenge some of the folks who have been here and who are leadership material to step in and begin to spend some time with other folks, and so we can walk together is his vision. And so we had a group together, and he presented this plan. You should have been there last night. Sorry, I'm picking on Gramble. But he presented this plan of what he wanted to do, and he had, the first meeting was going to be October 7th, which is a week from the night that he's presenting this to us, and, he had all this stuff laid out, and I was like, whoa, this is, and I recognize part of my nature is I'm a processor. You throw stuff at me and expect me to make a decision right now, I'm gonna do my best to hold you off, and so I can think through the details and get back to you. That's who I am, and I'm comfortable with that. I had to learn over the years, this is who I am. But part of it is this, this American ideal, and sorry, white men in the room, I just want to say it like I think it. This white male thing that, there's a problem, got to fix it, got to take the steps and do this, rather than just, let's spend some time and work together to figure this out. Nothing is so urgent that we got to do it right now, unless somebody's, lights are being cut off or something. There are urgent things, but there are things that we should take the time and relationally build. And I think that that's, in this story, one of the things that I get out of the story is how, it's just, even though it's messy, not necessarily most efficient, but if we can build this thing with leadership from among us, of the community, then it's going to be more sustainable, it's going to last longer, it's going to build people up in a way that they can, do the next thing. So with that, we're going to go through this exercise now.
Yes. So part of the ABCD practices, I'm going to just read this really quick, is discovering assets, which we're about to do in this exercise right now. That's what, when you're working with people groups who have not been told of their potential or have not been told of their giftings, you help them discover the assets. We discover what people care enough to act upon, where their passions are, where they have dreams, what they've aspired to. We mobilize groups to act based upon those passions, and we realize there's different roles for peoples and programs, that individuals are really good for certain things, and programs are really good for certain things, but we always, in our methodology, put people above programs. Because in our American culture, and it's not just white men, it's black men too, because I've sat in a room with a lot of my brown brothers, and they've driven me up the wall with being so programmatical. And so that's, it can go across the board. And so being more people-focused than we are program-focused, and also leading by stepping back. Ernest, just like Ernest was saying, we try to encourage people to kind of go ahead of us. We don't want to lead. We try to do everything, pushing people to take ownership and leadership in everything that they do in the community. So now we're going to do our exercise. ABCD is a treasure hunt. We have gifts of the head, which is when we do our human capacity inventory. We go through 3 areas of gifting or analysis that we can kind of readily pull people's giftings out so they can see them pretty quickly. Gifts of the head, gifts of the hand, gifts of the heart. Gifts of the head is what comes to you very easily. Where do you have an easy knowledge base? Some people are very gifted with their words, which both is gift of the head and gift of the heart. Sometimes these giftings overlap. But some people are very good with math or analytical skills. What comes easy to you mentally? Gifts of your hand, practical skills. What do you do? What do you love making with your hands? And it's not just about making things. My grandmother was a wonderful grandmother, and she had a gift with her hands, how she loved her grandchildren. And that's a gift that every community needs, is people who use their hands the correct way in showing love to each other. Things even as small as that, we just kind of overlook as a culture. And gifts of the heart, what are you passionate about? What would you die for? A lot of people in communities of material poverty, that's a lot of times people's dreams die. Or they don't even learn how to dream because they've been told there's no need, because it's never going to happen. And so that's something that we try to have conversations about for especially the older generations that did dream once upon a time when our communities were more cohesive. Don't let those dreams die. That still can become a reality. And help our young people learn how to dream as well, because that's something I think oftentimes has been robbed from our youth.